Hi everybody, it's been a while, but we're back with another Orchidea tutorial video. As promised, we're going to follow up with where we left off. In the last video, we talked about quickly generating an orchestration and quickly getting it out of Orchidea and into your notation program of choice, right? We did a quick MIDI export. And we did sort of encounter some of the natural limitations of a MIDI export. And so today we're going to concentrate on the idea of a new format to exchange and transfer data between music notation programs called XML, or in our case, a specialized syntax of that called MusicXML. We think of it as a kind of universal format for digital scores. MusicXML stands for Musical Extensible Markup Language. It's a structured XML-based file format, and it's designed for representing musical notation in a way that is both human-readable and machine-interpretable. Unlike MIDI, which primarily stores performance data, things like note onsets, velocities, durations, MusicXML encodes engraving details that are sort of defined by the user and are essential for score preparation and publishing. These include things like articulations, dynamics, ties, slurs, beams, tuplets, lyrics and text, chord symbols, key time signatures, bar lines, page layout things, beaming rules, font styles, all that kind of stuff. If you import a MIDI file, on the one hand, it has to kind of reinterpret the performance data and generate those notational things every time you do it. But you can sort of set this exactly how you want it, these different little parameters, and then encode them in the XML format itself. So you'll begin to see pretty quickly how powerful this is if you haven't already used it. MusicXML is rapidly becoming the sort of industry standard for transferring digital scores between software that we use in our field, things like Finale, Sibelius, Dorico, MuseScore, but it's also used across musicology and things. You may have dealt with it in those realms as well. So again, today we're not really going to talk much about generating the perfect orchestration. Instead, I'm going to kind of begin with what you see on the screen here. This is a let's call it a perfectly desirable orchestration that we've concocted here in the Orchidea standalone application for Mac OS. Here, I'll just click on the maquette and I'll just play what we've got. So imagine you've got some orchestration of a target you're happy with and you're ready to get it out of the program. I'll be demonstrating this in both the standalone and the Max versions, by the way. So when you've got this or a series of orchestrations in your maquette view, you can go to File and you can quickly choose Export Project as MusicXML and save it somewhere. I'll just save it with the default name, My Project, on the desktop. Save. And a MusicXML file just showed up there. And the quick and dirty example is to immediately open it in a notation program of choice. So here, I'm going to go to Dorico. Many people have switched over to Dorico, and I'll go from File, Import, MusicXML. And where is, oh, I need to look at my desktop. There is my project. I'm going to go to Open, and it's quickly going to render this in the notation program with kind of all the relevant information I need here. You can see there are some things here that weren't included in the MIDI. You've got ordinario markings or any playing style that might be relevant to what showed up in Orchidea. You've also got the dynamics, which are preserved. There's a lot more you can do with this, but you can see immediately there's more going on. So that's kind of the very basics of it. But what you might notice is you don't really have the time signature and tempo information available to you over here in the Orchidea standalone. So if you're like me and you're working kind of in the Max environment, you can really leverage the power of the Bach notation library that Orchidea sits on top of. I'm not going to walk through how to generate the orchestration. We'll do more of this in subsequent videos. But let's start with what we have in front of you. This is a patch that's very similar to the tutorial patches that we worked with. I think this is nearly identical to some of the tutorial patches that come with the software. Let's take this Bach roll. For those who might not be as familiar, this is a Bach.roll notation editor. And I'm going to just highlight the whole thing in an unlocked patch and Command-C to copy it. And I just want to work in a new space. So here in a new file, just going to paste the same thing. I just want to right now show you how to manipulate this, give it some quick tempo information, and get it out of here and into your notation program. One thing you might notice here, if I make a little attribute object and connect it up here and then just quickly choose the horizontal zoom, if I zoom in, you can see quarter tones. I could, of course, change this if I make a message box, type M, and set the tone division to something like 2. Then I can change this to quantified pitch, or I can choose quarter tones, or I can choose eighth tones. There's a lot of options here in Bach that are available to us. Let's leave it at quarter tones for the moment. Okay. Now, in order to get this thing into a metrical notation, we use a process known as quantification. Now, to quickly do this, I can use an object available to me in the Bach library called Bach.quantize. The way it works is I'll take the first outlet of the roll, the Bach roll, and I'll plug it in here to the middle inlet, the cold inlet of Bach quantize. I'll make a message box up here and send the message quantize here to the first inlet of the Bach roll. But at the same time, I'm going to send something here, some measure info, into the hot inlet triggering the calculation of Bach quantize. And I'm just going to send it some simple information at first. I'm going to send a metrical idea, like the meter 2/4, and a quick BPM assignment, quarter note equals 60. This syntax is something you can read further about in the help file for Bach quantize, which I'll show you in a second. But this is essentially all you need. And what comes out at the end is a quantized score, which needs to be populated inside of a Bach score object. So I'll connect this like so. So here's the basic patch for this kind of thing. And just so you know what you're looking at, this is a Bach roll, and this is a Bach score, two very different notation editors. So if I just use this minimal information, and if I click quantize, then here is the quantized score, which include things like the markers that were generated and preserved by Orchidea, the playing styles. In this case, it's mostly just ordinario playing. But you see things like measure numbers and quantified rhythms. You can refine all of this and choose tuplet divisions and all sorts of things. Oh, also, you might notice there are halftones here, but let's change the tone division here to 4 as well on our Bach score. Click that, and now we have the same quarter tones we had before. You can adjust spacing, things like this. You know, I'm going to press Shift and just drag down a little bit so that things aren't colliding as much. It's a really nice little system here. But you get to a point that sort of resembles this, and you're like, okay, how do I get this out of Max and into XML? Well, the most obvious thing, and if you look this up in the documentation, you have an export XML option. Now this is pretty standard and baseline, but I want to kind of get into the cool things you can do with it. So while there is export XML, there's also some added features you can add to this. You may notice, for example, that there are these little ordinario signs. And these might change frequently. You know, you might have different playing styles in different parts at different times, and you want to get that information out of Max and into your notation editor, Finale or otherwise. So we have to find out where that lives. And in case you don't use Bach, many of you might not be used to this, just click on any note head in here and press the number 1. And you'll see this little box shows up. This is I think it's called a slot editor or slot window. What I'm going to do is just press other numbers here on my keypad to see that there are all these different things called slots with different colors, and there's different information in here. Like, for example, the path to the sample that Orchidea generated, it's stored in here. All that gets stored in Bach's really interesting slot system. Once I have one of these slot windows open, the next step for me is to Command I, and I get the slot info window pop up, and here's where I can use my arrow keys. And if I just arrow over to the right, and I go to slot number 24, it's called the annotation slot, in the score that gets formatted from Orchidea, and that's where the ordinario marking lives. It's just a text annotation, and that's what you see sort of printed above the note head. We want slot number 24, where this data lives, to be included in our export. So I'm going to just X out of this. I'm going to close these windows. And in my export XML message, I'm going to add a parameter called direction slots. And the value I'm going to give it is 24. So what it says is export XML and include the information in slot 24 in the export. This will be encoded in my XML. And this will work. Now that I've got this message connected, I'm just going to click the message. And it gives me the chance to name it. I'm going to call this one my project. I'll just say version 2. .musicxml, crucially. And I save it. We have another XML file on the desktop. And at this point, if I open this in Dorico, let's go back to Dorico, and we don't want this one anymore. However, we do want to say Dorico's file, import, and MusicXML. And back on our desktop, I'll open version 2 of my project, which is the first thing I'm exporting from Max. And here we are again. You can see here is my complete orchestration. It's messy, as you might expect, but I have my quarter tones, I have my ordinario markings, and I can clean this stuff up. There are even things you can do in Max to sort of eliminate all the redundancy here of dynamics or ordinario markings. But the crucial thing is that every note has some kind of metadata that might need to be accounted for. And of course, you can play it back. So one other thing you might notice is that you do have the meters that you defined in the notation. Chord note equals 60, and it's a 2/4 bar. These can be set, this measure info in Bach can be set up front for the entire piece, but you can also have these changing measure by measure. These are all very helpfully documented in the Bach quantize help file. So just as a resource for you, you can option click on Bach quantize in your Max, and you see it's very helpful help file. You can click on the quantization help center, and you can look through all of these examples covering different topics about the quantization process, and things like measure info are covered in here. So this is a great resource to use if you haven't seen it yet, but it is available to those who aren't necessarily as comfortable working in the Max environment. And that's it for today's video. Thanks for watching. See you soon.